Welcome to Global Honors Evening, or I should say welcome back to Global Honors Evening. It has actually been 5 years since we've had an opportunity to do this, and we're so happy to have you all here tonight. We're going to be celebrating some pretty amazing individuals, some people who have made their impact in the world of international relations and cross-cultural understanding, both in Kansas City and on the world stage. And we're excited to have you all here to celebrate that with us. My name is Aaron Mann. I have the privilege and honor of serving as the president of the IRC this year. And again, I just want to say welcome. So we're here tonight to talk about Kansas City and Kansas City's connection to the wider world. And we're here to celebrate that. And we think about some of the strides that we've made in recent years. It's pretty amazing. If you think about just the Chiefs, for instance, in fact, we've been in 4 of the last 5 Super Bowls. Pretty amazing. And of course, those games are televised around the world. We have fans now in Germany. We have fans around the world because of that. You think about the KC Current. Kansas City is the location of the only stadium that was purpose-built for a women's professional sports team. It's a big deal. And then you think about some of the things that maybe aren't nearly as as sexy as professional sports, but you think about the fact that Kansas City has an outsized presence when it comes to architecture and engineering and animal health. The fact of the matter is Kansas City is on the global stage and there are eyes on us. And regular visits from Taylor Swift, that doesn't hurt. It doesn't hurt. We will take it all. So, again, we're here tonight to celebrate, and we are here tonight in large part because we have a very, very long list of fantastic sponsors, and I want to start by thanking all of them. And I'm going to ask you to hold your applause until the end. So for our gold sponsors, we have Jennifer Owen and Brad Cox of the Owen Cox Dance Group. We have the Stinson Law Firm, and we have the Lawrence D. Starr Center for Peace and Justice at the University of St. Mary. For our silver sponsors, we have Mr. Benny Lee, and we have Global Care Force. And then for our bronze sponsors, we have Holly Nielsen, we have Carolyn Fidel, and we have Baker University. And then we also have a lodging sponsor tonight. The Ada Hotel has been kind enough to provide lodging for our speaker tonight, and we want to thank them as well. But I also want to take a moment to thank everyone who donated items for our silent auction. And if you haven't seen them, we've got some out there. You can scan the QR code on the booklet. You can learn more about that. But I want to thank all of them. So if you join me, please, in thanking our sponsors and our donors. Now, of all those names that you heard, I want to single someone out. Jennifer Owen. Yeah. So we have the luxury of having Jennifer on our board this year, and Jennifer has taken on the leadership of the committee that's responsible for tonight's event. But do we have any committee members here? We've got Stephen here. Thank you. Excellent. Fantastic. So for Jennifer and your committee, thank you all for all the work that you put into this evening. It's already been a success. It will continue to be a success, but thank you so much. We really appreciate it. And then, of course, this really wouldn't have happened without our executive director, Evan, and our director of membership and engagement, Dan. So thank you. Thank you. And finally, I want to recognize one other group. If you are a former board member of the IRC, would you please raise your hand? Thank you so much for your contribution. And if you are a former president of the IRC, would you raise your hand? So the IRC was founded in 1955 by Elliot Berkeley. We are approaching our 70th anniversary. And on behalf of myself and the current board members, can you raise your hands, please? So on behalf of myself and the current board, we want to say to those of you who came before us, thank you. We recognize that we are standing on your shoulders, and we have the honor to continue this really, really important work, and we could not do it without you. So again, thank you. Now, Tonight's a celebration. We are here to celebrate some pretty amazing individuals, to hear from them, to hear their stories. But this is a celebration. I feel like we already have, but I want to make sure that we're going to enjoy ourselves tonight. So if you have had a chance to catch up with old friends, fantastic. I hope you make some new ones. I hope you have a little bit more to eat. I hope you have a little bit more to drink. And I hope you ridiculously overbid on every single option. It's for a good cause, I promise. All right, so enough from me. I want to introduce someone who knows firsthand what it's like to serve the mission of the IRC. And that is our former executive director, Linda Truck. Linda.
Good evening, everybody. I'm pleased to talk with you for a few minutes about Elliot Berkeley, who founded the IRC and with whom I worked as the last executive director during his lifetime. He was a wonderful person. He was born in 1924, so this is the centenary of his birth. And this is an especially good time to remember him. After serving in the military and receiving his bachelor's degree from Harvard and his master's and his PhD from Princeton, he returned home to Kansas City. His life's work was education. He taught history and government at UMKC, and then he taught social sciences here at the Kansas City Art Institute for many, many years. He also served as the Vice President of Development for the Art Institute, and he was the Dean of the college here during the 1960s. I'm going to have to disagree with Arian just a little bit because the IRC was actually founded in 1954. The first program was held in 1955, so we can sort of share it. But I would call this the 70th year. He started the International Relations Council in his kitchen with his wife because he thought that Kansas City needed to provide the highest level and the most current information about international affairs in Kansas City. He was the executive director of the IRC for 40 years, always on a volunteer basis, and he worked tirelessly to promote international education. The IRC's first speaker in January of 1955 was Eleanor Roosevelt. The list of distinguished individuals who visited Kansas City throughout the next 70 years would fill the rest of this evening, and I would love to tell you stories about lots of them, but that's not what we're doing tonight. Many, many of these well-known and respected experts included visits to area high schools and colleges as a part of their time in Kansas City. Elliot's mission was always the same: to give students and Kansas Cityans exposure to the full range of international ideas and viewpoints. Tonight's event, Global Honors Evening, has replaced the annual IRC Awards Banquet. The awards banquet was Elliot's pride and joy. He sold tables to the event for months in advance and always included donations for tables so that students could attend the event and hear the well-known speaker and award recipient in person. He would be very pleased that we now have the Elliot S. Berkeley Award for a high school student. Each year, in memory of him, the International Relations Council presents an award to an exceptional high school junior or senior who has demonstrated superior academic interest and competence in international studies. The award includes a $1,000 scholarship. This year, applicants were asked to write an essay based on the IRC's program themes in 2024. We received admissions from around the metro area, but in the end, it was Kara Agrawal, a junior at Pembroke Hill here in Kansas City, who stood out to our selection committee. According to his teachers at school, Harold has shown a unique commitment to understanding the international world. He is a member of numerous global-related clubs and activities, including a member of the Pembroke Academic World Quest team. World Quest is an IRC program. In his essay, Harold eloquently explored NATO's 75-year history, its proponents and detractors, and synthesized why he believes, despite some shortcomings, that it will remain a crucial force for peace and security in the years to come. I would also mention that Elliot graduated from Pembroke. So there's another connection. One of Harold's teachers describes him as the epitome of intellectual curiosity. Based on his application, we wholeheartedly agree and are so glad to have him involved with the IRC. We are glad to have Harold's parents and brother with us here this evening to help us celebrate. Please join me in welcoming to the stage the 2024 winner of the Berkeley Award, Harold Agarwal.
Good evening, everyone. First and foremost, I would like to thank my parents for helping me reach this position. Secondly, I would like to thank my 9th grade history teacher, Mr. Sankonovic, for writing my letter of recommendation. And finally, I would like to thank the IRC for giving me this opportunity to be on this stage and writing this essay. International relations, politics, and public policy are big key passions of mine, and I want to go into this community and this world to help both my local community and here in Kansas City and that of the world. So thank you all very much.
Hello, my name is Christina Arnone and I serve as the IRC's Education Committee Chair for 2024. It's my pleasure this evening to introduce our next honoree and someone who exemplifies commitment to language access in Kansas City, Dr. Deanna Vasilova. The award for academic leadership is given to local individuals or educational institutions that contribute to global education in the Midwest. Not only is Deanna an educator as a leader of world languages in the Kansas City public school system, she serves as CEO of Global Alliance for the Education of Nations, a nonprofit organization with the mission of promoting intercultural understanding through pedagogy and policy change that recognizes, respects, and values all identities and backgrounds as meaningful sources of knowledge. She leads a network of educators, policymakers, and activists who are committed to creating inclusive and equitable learning environments for all. Deanna is a firm believer in the transformative power of education. She provides research, equity, and advocacy services to various organizations and educational systems. Under her leadership, Deanna has transformed instruction towards learning in a global ecosystem for students, both in dual language immersion and in traditional world language classes. Since joining the Kansas City public school system as their first ever world languages coordinator, she has become one of the most instrumental figures in the field of global education in Kansas City. We most recently saw her commitment on Tuesday at our annual Your Global Future College and Career Fair on the UMKC campus, as she encouraged a large group of KCPS students to explore what international opportunities they are able to engage with after high school and beyond. The passion and enthusiasm Deanna brings was never more apparent. It is a sincere pleasure to recognize Dr. Deanna Vasilova with this award for academic leadership.
Thank you. Good evening. And thank you again, IRC Kansas City and the international community for this honor. I have been asked to say a few words regarding education, international relations, as it relates to Kansas City. And I would like to respond by sharing stories with a few individuals who are here this evening. First and foremost, I would like to mention my mother, Linda Vasilovac. Would you please stand? My mom is the strongest woman I know, and I don't know if it's because of her farm roots or because she graduated from Kansas City Public Schools. But I do know this, that she had an elementary teacher who asked her to write a pen pal in China, and her pen pal wrote back and sent her a doll. This is in the 50s, y'all. And so I am convinced that that single action opened my mother's eyes to the world and had a great influence on my upbringing and my life, thanks to that educator. And I brought several educators with me here this evening. And I would like to introduce the first two from China. I will start with Xiaoting Lu and Bing Zhang, both from China, who are instructors of Mandarin and who extend those same experiences to their students. Thank you again for your service. And let me tell you, it is not easy to teach Chinese in the United States in our current environment. And despite every day, these ladies are showing examples of their culture, their traditions, and serve as ideal models for their students, trying to understand the positive and the negative rhetoric they may hear in the media or within their community. I'm so proud of their commitment to our students, and I thank you both. I also want to mention Nina Geller, who provides additional perspectives as an American teaching Chinese and is representing our immersion program at Foreign Language Academy, the only immersion program of its kind on the Missouri side. Thank you for your exceptional service. I have brought a few educators of French with me. Godlove Tebe from Cameroon. And Philippe Vinemont from Belgium, who have been leaders in education for 30 years at Kansas City Public Schools, and who have remained, despite the change we have all seen in education in the United States, whether it's the banning of books, the intolerance for courageous conversations, or the violence in our schools that we are asked to endure. Thank you both for helping me navigate this very difficult environment and for the brilliant perspective you bring to an educational system in the United States. Please stand up, take a bow, a long bow. Thank you. And lastly, I want to talk about the other side of my family, Tom and Lydia Powell. Please stand up. Tom is a deacon at St. Anthony's in the Northeast and is a consistent advocate for both our Kansas City and international communities. And Lydia Powell, who has a story she wants to share with you about her family, who was denied access to housing because of their Mexican roots. Thank them. The story continues to be repeated. But within these three domains, education, international relations, and Kansas City, we hold the solution to solve our most challenging issues, the interconnectedness of humans. Thank you for this honor this evening. Thank you for welcoming me. Thank you for welcoming all of us. We look forward to the continued conversations with you this evening. Have a good evening. Thank you.
August of 2023, but she spent a lifetime engaging deeply with the international world and recognizing the power of global affairs. In her 25-year career, Dr. Burns-Wallace has opened greater access to opportunities, shaped policies that expand resources, and better position communities to thrive. She's an award-winning public sector leader and educator and is recognized for her ability to envision and implement innovative solutions that yield a very high impact for the people that she serves. Dr. Burns-Wallace began her career as a diplomat with the U.S. Department of State, serving tours in China, South Africa, and in Washington, D.C. She was trained in French and Mandarin Chinese. Prior to her work at the Kauffman Foundation, Dr. Burns-Wallace was the Secretary of Administration and the Chief Information Technology Officer for the state of Kansas under Governor Laura Kelly. As leader of the Kauffman Foundation, she's led development of a strategy for greater collective impact, which includes 3 focus areas: college access and completion, workforce and career development, and entrepreneurship. She believes that community development is a collaborative effort and is working to ensure that the Kansas City community can be an equitable place for all. It's our real privilege and honor to be awarding Dr. D'Angela Burns-Wallace the award for contributions to the community. You come up and you can help me. Okay, you can say a few words.
Good evening. It is an honor and a privilege to be here. And I have to say, sometimes you have to find your people. And when I received an email and learned about this evening, but also the organization and the history of the organization, I said, oh, I think I found another group of my people. Because when you grow up in Kansas City, and when I was young here in Kansas City, and I knew I wanted to travel the world, and I knew I wanted to learn languages, and I knew I wanted to see other places and understand cultures and ideas and conversations, and people looked at me and said, huh? And when I entered the State Department and worked as a diplomat, my dad would say, he would tell people, she works, for the State Department, and they say, what state? So, my passion for international everything, I'm not sure where exactly it came from. I knew early on that I wanted to learn about people, because people were amazing, they were intriguing. But to be able to learn about people, you needed to have an understanding of culture and society and be able to speak languages. Because in learning language, you learn culture, you learn history, you connect in a different way. So it wasn't just wanting to be international and to travel all over, but to take the time and learn languages and to study them deeply. And one day I found a path to the State Department to become a diplomat. That's my first career. Growing up in Kansas City, I didn't even know what that was. I didn't know what a Foreign Service Officer was. I didn't know what that pathway was. I found that I did my undergrad at Stanford University and would go on to get a master's in international policy from Princeton University. And though that journey led me to a path in the Foreign Service and to live and work all over the world. In my last year at the State Department, I was a special assistant to Secretary Powell. Secretary Powell started a program that was called Hometown Diplomats because he sent us back across the U.S. to share the Foreign Service and the pathway and careers of the Foreign Service across the U.S. He felt that the Foreign Service Corps, our diplomatic corps, needed to reflect the rich experiences and diversity of the United States. And that meant many different things, ethnic and racial, but it also meant gender and regions. I was one of the few Foreign Service officers out of the Missouri, Kansas area. And so I spent a year as a hometown diplomat traveling all throughout the Midwest and parts of the South talking about the Foreign Service. And to this day, I continue to recruit and be a part of programs that identify college students to prepare them for the Foreign Service exam, fellowships, and other opportunities with the State Department, USAID, the International Commerce Corps, and various other pathways here in Kansas City and around the nation. So I share all that to simply say, again, I found my people because that understanding of how important it is to know our place in the world, to bring Kansas City to the world, and to bring the world to Kansas City. Most recently, I joined the board of Visit KC. Visit KC does a lot of our tourism efforts here for the city and for the region. And if you had the opportunity to hear their annual update about a month ago, you may have heard that they, in the last year, created a role specifically targeted on recruiting international visitors to the Kansas City region. We are extremely popular, and people are excited to come and visit Kansas City. And opportunities and organizations in partnership like Visit KC that have recognized and understand the power of amplifying who we are in Kansas City around the world, but also helping Kansas City be better prepared to engage internationally is our future. Thank you so much for this honor tonight. I so appreciate it.
That I know and I love and I respect dearly to hear the awardees that we have tonight speak. It has me feeling quite emotional, and I feel very, very lucky to be in the position that I'm in this evening. I would like to specifically thank our membership and community engagement coordinator, Jan Fitzpatrick, my one and only current coworker at the IRC. When you're a small organization, you all end up doing a little bit of everything, and Dan is there every step of the way. He's a great friend of mine, someone who I spend a lot of time with outside of work. I'm really on the volleyball court where we play a little rec league. We're pretty good. And I would also like specifically to thank Jennifer again for her tireless work in making this event happen. This beautiful space, all that is planned this evening, the food, so much of that went through Jennifer, and it means so much that so much time out of your very busy schedule to make that happen. So thank you so much. The IRC serves a lot of different purposes. I think it serves a different purpose to everyone who engages with it. For some people, it's a chance to gather with their friends, to discuss their past travels, to discuss current events. For myself, personally, it's really become this place of community gathering. I didn't expect to be working necessarily in the international space here in my career, but I'm so happy that I have ended up in this role, and I get to learn so much from people on a daily basis, and that is just an incredible privilege to have as the leader of this organization, to have it be not only a gift, but a true learning experience every day in which I come into work. It's truly a blessing. In the past year, we've explored a lot of topics at the IRC. As Executive Director, I really wanted to expand the purview of what we program around at the IRC, and I'm proud to say that I think we've done that. In the past year, we've explored the role of sports and diplomacy, culminating with our Berkeley lecture in May, which brought Travis Murphy, who's the former head of international government affairs for the National Basketball Association, and was also a lead negotiator in releasing Brittany Griner from Russia. We also welcomed 8 novelists, poets, and journalists born in the former USSR, and they shared their work influenced by the war in Ukraine. Through poignant fiction and nonfiction, they experienced the nuanced exploration of resilience, identity, and the human spirit amidst turmoil. And of course, we held World Quest, which I know so many of you know and love. If you're a regular World Quest attendee, would you raise your hand, make a little noise, whatever. Know that World Quest is returning on Thursday, April 10th back at UMKC. Mike Wood is probably, I think he's in France right now. He's probably cooking up questions. Maybe, well, it'll be a little bit, but he might be thinking of them right now. He loves stumping you, so you have that to look forward to again. And just on Tuesday, we held Your Global Future, which gathered over 800 students from about 20 schools. Businesses, universities, organizations were showing just all the international opportunities that a student can have in their future. Looking around that room, seeing people engage with these students, it was just an incredible experience. You can see Board President Aaron Mann there talking about Terracon. My very nice teacher. Yeah. I would also like to talk about some current programs that we are in the midst of and coming up. We currently are in the midst of a climate series, and we've been gathering conservationists and scientists, policymakers and corporate leaders who are all sharing their experiences on critical topics that affect our planet. The program series is centered around global effects, catalysts, and trends around the climate crisis, as well as their local impacts in Kansas City and beyond. Our next program in the series is next week, Wednesday, at Johnson County Community College. It will feature Robert Ribori, President and CEO of Biomacrics, who will be talking about his company's wastewater treatment technologies. Dominique Davison of Draw Architecture will talk about sustainability being on the forefront of building design. Ryan Grova, CEO and founder of Bridgewise, will share information about the company's journey to becoming an industry leader in the energy efficiency solutions. This is an example of a program that we have in that series and touching on these pertinent issues that impact us all one way or another. We'll also be hosting an author talk on Wednesday, October 30th with Dr. Lindsay Krasnoff, who will be talking about her 2023 book, Basketball Empire, France and the Making of the Global NBA. Dr. Krasnoff will showcase how basketball's global takeover could not have happened without France, and exploring the interactions with the United States and colonial legacies with Francophone Africa and the Afro-Caribbean. She'll be taking us back to the very beginnings of basketball, showing how remnants of the empire have shaped the game, and she'll explore why so many French basketball players have joined the NBA and WNBA, and how their presence has helped shape the leagues. We work to give a lot of access points to the IRC. No matter your background, your experience, we want to build a community who value civic engagement. We believe the focus of our work is of the utmost importance right now in this time. We certainly live in an incredibly polarized world right now, and having nuanced dialogue around these issues is not always easy to come by. I'd like to think we provide a unique opportunity to discuss sometimes difficult issues in a way that centers the human experience, as opposed to digesting everything through a screen. We're very happy to have you along for the ride, and we value each and every one of you. I would now like to turn to a presentation of the Distinguished Service Award for International Statesmanship. The IRC presents the Distinguished Service Award for International Statesmanship to individuals who have made outstanding contributions to international commerce, diplomacy, and education. This year we are honored to present this honor to Eric Schwartz, chair of the Hubert H. Humphrey School of Public Affairs at the University of Minnesota. Eric Schwartz's career has been focused on issues around refugees and resettlement. From 2017 to 2022, he served as president of Refugees International, a Washington, D.C.-based organization that reports and advocates in support of the rights of refugees and displaced persons around the world. From 2011 to 2017, in his first tenure as dean of the Humphrey School, the school expanded its academic programs and its external engagement in Minnesota, the nation, and the world. Prior to arrival at the Humphrey School, Eric served as the U.S. Assistant Secretary of State for Population, Refugees, and Migration, having been nominated by President Obama and confirmed by the U.S. Senate in 2009. Working with the Secretary of State Hillary Clinton, he served as the Department of State's principal humanitarian official, managing a $1.85 billion budget, as well as State Department policy and programs for U.S. refugee admissions and U.S. international assistance worldwide. We are proud to add to the accolades for this very deserving honoree. For his considerable and continuing contributions to displaced people, please help us welcome and congratulate Eric Schwartz.
Well, first, I just have to express my deepest appreciation for this award. It's a pleasure to be in Kansas City, and I look forward to coming back. I want to be sure that I know how to operate this. I presume I just used the arrow. Okay, good. As I say, it's a real pleasure for me to be here. I've been asked by Evan and Dan to speak for about 20 minutes. I always like to let the audience know what they have to endure. And I always try to follow instructions. It's a real pleasure for me to be here. As a child growing up in New York and a fan of the New York football Jets, my earliest memories of Kansas City, probably my only memories of Kansas City, were of Len Dawson and Jan Stenerud. I think most of the people here are probably too young to remember who they were. But as I grew and even had a chance to visit this lovely city, I learned about a number of characteristics that are near and dear to my heart. I am a failed jazz musician and a jazz and music heritage here. The barbecue culture, the Art Deco architecture, the Negro Leagues Football Museum, which we had the opportunity to visit today, and which I visited in the past, and the Midwestern vibrancy and hospitality, something your city shares with Minneapolis, or maybe Minneapolis shares with your city. And Minneapolis, where I have spent so much of my time over the past decade or so. So in my remarks this evening, I want to pick up on themes and draw from comments that I've really developed and have animated my perspectives over several years. And begin by noting that there really are, to my mind, three sets of imperatives that underlie considerations of how governments, how citizens, and how affected people believe they should deal with the needs of refugees, migrants, forced from their homes, or to use a term coined by analysts Alex Lanikoff and Leah Zamor, fleers of necessity. There is the imperative of humanity, the notion that human suffering, wherever it occurs, human dignity, wherever it is at risk, must command the attention of all humankind. That proposition is actually baked into United Nations documents and the articulated policies and commitments of governments like the United States. There is the perspective that increasingly comes from affected communities, that individuals who are fleeing human rights abuses, disaster, or conditions that make their lives unlivable are not victims depending on the kindness of others, but rather individuals capable of agency and perseverance, and indeed entitled to basic human rights. And then there are political and foreign policy and national security interests as governments perceive them. Those interests on the one hand, and the imperative of humanity and human rights on the other, they don't need to conflict with one another. Indeed, they haven't conflicted with one another in our own experience in the United States. To be sure, as we know from this unusual election campaign, there are tensions, there are policy challenges, but there is no question that refugee and asylee participation in our society, in our economies, have had overwhelming benefits for the growth and for the development of the United States. But more on that in a moment. Let me first put all of this into a broader context, because I think that's what this organization is about. The world in which we live, and a world where the United States has claimed and exercised leadership. At the end of 2021, the UN High Commissioner for Refugees estimated that there were some 89 million people forcibly displaced globally as a result of conflict, persecution, and violations of human rights. The majority of whom, 53 million, were displaced within their own countries, with about 27 million displaced as refugees, that is, beyond the borders of their countries. But those numbers had increased by the end of 2023 to some 117 million displaced, 43 million refugees, and 68 million IDPs, as they are known, an anodyne term for a extremely difficult condition. The remainder were those seeking asylum in countries of refuge and individuals in various conditions of need. Much of the increase was due to the war in Ukraine, and these are images from a report of a trip I took in 2022, shortly before I left Refugees International, and shortly after the invasion, the Russian invasion. In fact, and drawing primarily, but not exclusively, from UNHCR figures, just 6 countries are the source of the vast majority of the world's refugees. And for this presentation, I'm also including Venezuelans, of whom there are perhaps 6 million outside of Venezuela. And in fact, UNHCR notes that 73% of refugees originate from just 5 countries: Afghanistan, Syria, Venezuela, Ukraine, and South Sudan. And Palestinians, considered by most experts to be refugees in international law, but under the jurisdiction of a separate UN organization, are part of these numbers. Most of the world's refugees live in protracted displacement, and their conditions vary. Some have a relatively high degree of protection. Venezuelans in Colombia, Syrians, and others, for example, in Germany. But if you are, say, a Syrian in Lebanon, chances are that you live both in poverty and in fear of return to Syria. And if you are one of about 1 million Rohingya in Bangladesh, your conditions are very fragile at best, and for many quite dark. Nearly 40% of the total worldwide population of refugees are hosted by just 5 countries: Iran, Turkey, Colombia, Germany, and Pakistan. And while challenges do seem daunting, it is worth remembering that 100 million people represent only about 1.25% of the world's population. With political will, these are manageable changes. The 1951 Convention on the Status of Refugees and its 1967 Protocol provide a foundation for protection. That convention was developed in the aftermath of the Holocaust and the Second World War and the resulting displacement, not only of Jews, but of people of so many nationalities. The convention and its 1967 protocol define a refugee as a person who is outside their country of origin and has a well-founded fear of persecution, severe mistreatment due to their race, their religion, their nationality, their membership in a particular social group or political opinion, and owing to that fear is unable or unwilling to return. But one doesn't need, in this world today, one doesn't need to be a refugee expert to know that if this refugee convention standard were the sole basis on which people who need to flee could actually flee, protection would be inadequate. In fact, most of the more than 40 million people around the world we regard as refugees, so many of whom are fleeing conflict, might well not meet that very narrow refugee standard. Beyond that, there are at least tens of millions who are going to be displaced within and beyond borders due to disasters born by natural hazards and exacerbated by climate change. As reflected in this report, Climate Change 2022, Impacts, Adaptation, and Vulnerability, this was a working group contribution to the 6th assessment report of the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. That is a mouthful, but this is a critically important process. Many American academics are involved in it, and it's designed to really have the world sort of come to grips with what this challenge is. And this working group describes dramatic impacts that are upon us. The report declares with high confidence that climate change is contributing to humanitarian crises, where climate hazards interact with high vulnerability, that climate and weather extremes are increasingly driving displacement in all regions, with small island states disproportionately affected, and that approximately 3.3 to 3.6 billion people live in contexts that are highly vulnerable to climate change. There are reports of the Climate Displacement Program of Refugees International, excuse me for continuing to reference the organization that I departed 2 years ago, giving more of a sense of just how people's lives have been affected by drought in Ethiopia, cyclones in Mozambique, and Zimbabwe. In fact, there has been some recognition. You can tell there's a theme in this book. We have lots of challenges, but none are insurmountable. There have been some recognition in domestic laws and practice, and international law and practice, of an imperative for protection for those forced to flee, even where these individualized, narrow refugee determinations have not been made, and even when they have not been anticipated. In terms of the law, there is something called the Cartagena Declaration on Refugees, adopted by Latin American countries in 1984, which expands the refugee definition to include those who have fled their country because their lives, their safety, and freedom have been threatened by circumstances which severely disrupt public order. There is the 1969 Organization of African Unity Convention governing specific aspects of refugee problems in Africa, which includes in its definition people who, due to events seriously disturbing public order, are compelled to flee and seek refuge. There are a range of avenues in Europe, elsewhere, through which those who fear harm can obtain some degree of status and protection. In the United States, we have provisions that authorize permission to stay for those who are in or are seeking entry and who have legitimate fears about returning to their countries of refuge. those Haitians in Springfield, the object of such charged and misleading rhetoric, were largely beneficiaries of this status, temporary protected status. And there are so-called migration pathway efforts, that is, the use of regular migration programs, such as those relating to employment visas, that are not refugee or protection oriented, but can benefit those who are compelled to migrate. And we've seen these provisions and others translated into approaches of generosity. For instance, Colombia is currently host to upwards of 3 million Venezuelans and has taken measures toward regularization of their status, despite the fact that many would probably not meet conventional definitions of what it means to be a refugee. And in 2015 and 2016, German authorities admitted more than 1 million people in Germany to seek asylum. Years later, there is considerable analysis indicating positive economic, social, and demographic impacts for the country. In other parts of the world, from Ecuador to Uganda to Rwanda and beyond, there have been meaningful efforts to enable refugees to work and to realize their ambitions for themselves and for their families, often aided by programs of the UN High Commissioner for Refugees, the World Bank, and others. And of course, many millions of Ukrainians have found temporary refuge outside Ukraine, including in the United States. In fact, the United States in recent years has admitted hundreds of thousands of people from Ukraine, from Afghanistan, parts of Latin America. And in all of these cases, issues around crossing borders were not at play. They did not arise. All of these examples, and more I could cite, have come with challenges, but they are nonetheless heartening. And while they are justified in terms of the principles of humanity that I had laid out earlier, they also have, as it happens, contributed to the growth and the development of our country and our societies. In the United States, we have not historically been at risk of experiencing the degree of labor shortages that other wealthy nations have experienced, and that is due in large measure to immigration, including resettlement of refugees and asylums. The economic growth and innovation that has made the United States the economic envy of the world would simply not have been possible otherwise. Even still, around the country and in Minnesota where I teach, there have been reports about significant and substantial labor shortages. The shortages that the reporting in which I've been involved has asserted that dramatic increases of workers from abroad will be necessary to sustain levels of economic activity and an economic growth. The same is true here in Kansas City, where recent reporting has suggested a very similar set of needs, noting that in recent years job openings have far exceeded the numbers of unemployed workers. At the same time, it would be foolish for me to suggest there are no concerning developments. I think all of the challenging issues as a matter of policy can be addressed. But that doesn't mean there aren't considerable concerning developments. Migration and even the resettlement of refugees has been a political wedge issue, with loud voices of intolerance appealing to our fears rather than our hopes and aspirations and real capacities. So what does this all mean? Well, for one thing, as troubling as it may be, this situation should not be particularly surprising. As new nationalities joined U.S. society, they were often ostracized. Irish and Italians in the 19th century and part of the 20th century. Mexicans, Chinese, to say nothing of of Africans were initially considered outcasts. And of course, to say nothing of our national shame, of slavery. We no longer have the know-nothing party of the 19th century. Or demagogues like Charles Edward Kaufman in the 20th century, who repeatedly had tens of millions of followers listening to his anti-Semitic and restrictionist rants. And though we no longer have Breckinridge Long, the State Department official who vigorously fought attempts to secure immigration of Jewish refugees during the Holocaust, we do have our contemporary restrictionists and voices of intolerance, and those who would fan the flames of fear rather than engage in reasoned discussion and dialogue of critical issues. And there is a debate with obvious historical analogs about how voices of reason, of tolerance should engage when there is understandable concern that strong expressions of support, say for welcoming the stranger, will excite even broader expressions of intolerance. The challenge has been ever present and ongoing, and it seems to me that the solution cannot be to duck and cover. In fact, I fear that when voices of reason and humanity refrain from public advocacy, they do not prevent forces of intolerance from coming to the fore, but rather give such forces a clearer path. In the United States, we have new capacities to provide information about the contributions of immigrants, of refugees, to the fabric of our society. And there are organizations that have increasingly sought from the Democratic Republic of the Congo and beyond. And while not without challenges, refugees have thrived in this wonderful city and contributed and continue to contribute to its economic and social vibrancy. And this city and its civic and governmental leaders must play a key role in fostering an environment of welcome, and they do. From sports and entertainment to industry and commerce, Kansas City is and should be a leader in the Midwest and throughout the country. Such an approach best reflects both the interests and the values that should guide and animate our societies, and really societies around the world. Thank you.
We'll stick around for a little bit and have some dessert coffee. The bar is still open until 9. And if you haven't done yet, we very much encourage you to peruse the silent auction website, which can be accessed via QR code on your program, and also at this URL here on the screen. We would really generously like to thank those of you who donated to the auction items. There's some really absolutely wonderful stuff in there, so we hope that you will please check it out. It will be open until 9 p.m. tomorrow, so if you get home or you wake up tomorrow and you're like, man, I should have really bid on that. You have all day tomorrow. But if you look at something and you see the buy it now price and you're like, I want this tonight, we can work with you. We can scan a card. We can get you checked out. So please, it really, really helps us continue our mission, continue what we do here at the IRC. So we hope you will support us. Again, thank you so much for being here this evening. Please enjoy the rest of your night. Stick around and chat for a little bit. But safe travels home, and we hope to see you at the next IRC event. Thank you so much.
You